You are on Crazy Karen HOA. The warning sticker hit the glass while I was still talking. You are not special, you are just next. That was Michelle Hayes, Fines and Enforcement Coordinator for the Stonegate Reserve Community Association in Frederick, Maryland. She was standing in my driveway at 7 in the evening, with her arms crossed and a tow truck idling at the curb behind her. A bright yellow wheel clamp was locked onto my front driver's side tire. I had a lug wrench in my hand because I had been about to check my spare. Michelle saw me holding it near the boot and lost her mind. She screamed that touching the boot would be tampering, and she would call the police while the tow truck rolled in. I am a veteran learning a trade in an apprentice program. I work rotating shifts, and I keep odd hours. I moved into Stonegate Reserve 6 months ago because the rent was reasonable and the neighborhood looked quiet. I was wrong about the quiet part. The HOA calls everything a towable offense. Guest parking requires a permit. Street parking after 6 p.m. is banned. Fire lane violations get you booted on site. The board has a vendor on speed dial, and Michelle brags about collections at every meeting. She pointed at the clamp. That stays until you pay the fine and the removal fee. If you touch it, I call the cops and add tampering charges. I set the lug wrench on the ground near the wheel. I was not touching anything. I was checking my spare. My car is in my driveway. I did not park illegally. Michelle pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of me. You parked a guest in the fire lane last week. You did not display a valid permit. You ignored the warning. Now you pay, or the truck takes it. I did not park anyone in the fire lane. My friend parked in a guest spot with a day pass on the dashboard. I have the pass. I have photos. Michelle shook her head. The pass was crooked. That makes it invalid. The rules say permits must be displayed properly. You signed the covenants. Now you live the covenants. The pass was taped to the windshield. It was visible. It had the date and the unit number. Michelle tapped her phone. Crooked means not valid. I documented it. You got a notice. You did not respond. Now it escalates. I never got a notice. She held up her phone and showed me a photo of a paper taped to my door. I took this 4 days ago. You had 72 hours to appeal. You did not. The fine is enforceable. I pulled out my phone and opened my camera roll. I have a time-stamped security clip from my doorbell camera. No one came to my door 4 days ago. The first time anyone came was yesterday, and that was a guy selling solar panels. Michelle's face went red. You are lying. I was here. I left the notice myself. Then you will be in my footage. Let me pull it up. I opened the app. The footage was still uploading from the cloud. The progress bar said 3 minutes. I needed it to finish before she spun the story. The tow truck driver climbed out of the cab and walked over. He was a middle-aged guy in a stained blue hoodie. He looked at the boot, then at Michelle. You want this one on the flatbed, or you want me to wait? Michelle pointed at my car. Take it. He is tampering, and he is hostile. I held up my phone. I am not tampering. I am standing here. I have proof she did not serve the notice. I need 3 more minutes for the video to upload. The driver looked at Michelle. You got the authorization paperwork? She pulled a folded page from her blazer pocket and handed it to him. Right here. Signed by the board president. Vehicle is in violation. Owner refused to comply, tow authorized. I stepped closer. That is not true. I never refused anything. I never got a notice. She is fabricating this. Michelle turned to me and smiled. I can put you on the agenda and keep you there. You think you are the first one to fight me? I have 3 years of this. I know the process. You do not. Now step back, or I call the cops for interference. A rideshare driver pulled up across the street and parked. He got out, leaned against his car, and rolled his eyes while watching the whole scene. He lit a cigarette and pulled out his phone. The tow truck driver walked back to his truck and started unwinding the winch cable. The metallic scrape of the hook dragging across the bed made my teeth hurt. Michelle stood next to my car with her arms crossed. The upload bar on my phone hit 91%. I looked at the rideshare driver. You see this? You see what is happening? He nodded and held up his phone. I am recording. This is insane. Michelle spun toward him. You are not a resident. This is private property. You cannot record here. The driver laughed. I am on a public street. I can record whatever I want. Michelle pulled out her phone and took a photo of the driver. I am reporting you for trespassing and harassment. The upload bar hit 100%. I opened the footage and scrubbed to 4 days ago. Nothing. I scrubbed to yesterday. A guy in a polo shirt with a solar company logo knocked and left a flyer. No Michelle. I held up the phone. Here. 4 days ago, no one came. Yesterday, solar guy. That is it. You lied. Michelle did not even look. You edited that. I know you tech guys. You can fake anything. I turned to the tow driver. She is lying. I have the raw file. I can email it to you right now. The driver stopped pulling the cable and looked at Michelle. You got documentation she refused to pay? Michelle held up her phone. I have my records. I have photos. I have the board authorization. That is all I need. I let her threaten a lien, because that threat would look terrible on the record. She pointed at me. If you do not pay by Monday, I file a lien. The HOA has that right. You signed the covenants, now you live the covenants. The driver hooked the cable to my front axle and started winching. The car lurched forward an inch. I stepped back and called out to the rideshare driver. You still recording? He nodded. Whole thing. This is wild. I pulled up my contacts and called my landlord. He answered on the second ring. I explained the situation in 30 seconds. He said he would call the management company and see what the hell was going on. He told me not to let them take the car without getting a receipt and a case number. Michelle walked over and stood between me and the driver. You are wasting everyone's time. The truck is taking your car. You will get a bill for the tow, the boot removal, the fine, and the storage fees. If you want it back, you pay. If you do not, we auction it in 30 days. The driver walked back to the cab and flipped a switch. The winch groaned and the cable went tight. My front wheels started to lift. I took a photo of the setup, the cable, the boot, and Michelle standing right there with her arms crossed. My phone buzzed. My landlord texted me the name of the management company regional supervisor and a number. He said the supervisor was pissed and wanted to talk to me immediately. I called. A woman answered. This is Linda Vargas, regional supervisor for Stonegate Property Management. Who am I speaking with? I gave her my name and unit number. I explained the tow, the boot, the missing notice, and Michelle's story. Linda asked me to send her the doorbell footage. I sent it while we were on the line. She was quiet for 10 seconds. Then she said, Michelle Hayes is not authorized to order tows. The board president has to sign off, and the management company has to approve it. If she ordered this on her own, She is in violation of her role and the vendor agreement. I looked at Michelle. She was watching the driver raise my car onto the flatbed. I asked Linda what I should do right now. Linda said, "Tell the driver to stop. Tell him the management company is revoking the authorization. If he does not stop, get his company name and truck number and file a stolen vehicle report with the police." I walked over to the driver. The management company regional supervisor says this tow is not authorized. Michelle does not have authority to order it. You need to stop. The driver looked at Michelle. She held up the paper. I have board approval. This is signed. I held up my phone. The management company says that signature is not valid without their approval. You are taking my car illegally. The driver stopped the lift. He pulled out his phone and made a call. He spoke for about a minute, then hung up. He looked at Michelle. My dispatcher says if the management company is disputing this, I have to stand down. I am not getting in the middle of a contract fight. Michelle's face went purple. You do not work for the management company, you work for the HOA. I authorized this tow. You take the car. The driver shook his head. I work for the tow company. The HOA is my client, but if the property manager is saying no, I do not touch it. I am not risking my license. Michelle jabbed her finger at him. I will have you banned from every property in this county. You are in breach. The driver walked to the winch controls and lowered my car back onto the driveway. He unhooked the cable, climbed into the cab, and drove off. Michelle stood there, shaking. I looked at her. You want to unlock the boot now, or do I call the cops and report an illegal clamp? She pulled a key from her pocket and unlocked the boot. She yanked it off the wheel and threw it into the back of her SUV. Then she turned to me. This is not over. You just made an enemy. I held up my phone. I have everything on video. I have the management company on record saying you are not authorized. If you try this again, I will file charges. She got in her SUV and drove off. The rideshare driver walked over and handed me his phone. I sent you the video. You need anything else? Let me know. That was the craziest thing I have seen in months. I thanked him and went inside. My hands were shaking. I uploaded the rideshare driver's video to my cloud and sent copies to Linda and my landlord. Then I sat down and tried to figure out what the hell just happened. Linda called me back an hour later. She said the board president claimed he never signed the authorization. Michelle had forged it. The tow company confirmed they received the order directly from Michelle, not through the management company. Linda said she was recommending the board terminate Michelle's role and investigate all her enforcement actions for the past year. I asked what would happen to the fines and fees Michelle had collected. Linda said the board would have to review every case. If any were fraudulent or procedurally improper, they would have to issue refunds and retract the violations. I asked if I needed a lawyer. Linda said not yet, but she recommended I document everything and attend the next board meeting. She said the board was scheduling an emergency session for the following week, and I should be there to give my side. I hung up and opened a new folder on my laptop. I labeled it HOA Evidence and started organizing files. Doorbell footage. Photos of the boot. The rideshare driver's video. Screenshots of my texts with the landlord. Linda's voicemail. I burned it all to a thumb drive and put the drive in my glove box. The next morning I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I answered. A man introduced himself as Peter Chen, a former board member at Stonegate Reserve. He said he heard about the tow incident and wanted to talk. I asked how he heard. He said a neighbor sent him the rideshare video, and he recognized Michelle's pattern. I met him at a coffee shop near the neighborhood. Peter was in his 60s, gray hair, calm voice. He ordered a black coffee and sat across from me. He said he served on the board for 2 years and resigned after Michelle was hired as the fines coordinator. He said she was supposed to handle administrative tasks and track compliance, but she turned the role into a revenue operation. She started writing violations for things that were not in the covenants. She partnered with a tow company and got a kickback for every car they impounded. She refused to accept payments in person and then charged late fees when people mailed checks that took too long to process. Peter said he tried to raise concerns at a board meeting. Michelle accused him of obstructing enforcement and threatened to put his own property under audit. He resigned a month later. He said at least 4 other residents had similar stories, but most of them moved out or paid the fines to avoid the fight. I asked if he had documentation. He pulled a folder from his bag and slid it across the table. Inside were printouts of emails, meeting minutes, and a spreadsheet tracking fines collected over 3 years. The numbers jumped after Michelle started. The year before she was hired, the HOA collected $4,000 in fines. The year after, $23,000. The current year was on track for $35,000. Peter tapped the spreadsheet. Most of these are parking violations and guest pass issues. She targets people who work nights or have irregular schedules. She knows you will not be around to contest the notice in person. By the time you find out, the fine is locked in and the appeal window is closed. I asked if the board knew. Peter said the board president knew and did not care. The treasurer knew and called it good business. The rest of the board either did not pay attention or were scared of Michelle. Peter leaned forward. If you are going to fight this, you need to go after the vendor agreement. The tow company has an exclusive contract with the HOA. That contract is not approved by the management company, which means it is probably not legal. If you can prove Michelle is getting kickbacks, the whole thing falls apart. I asked how I prove kickbacks. Peter said, request the vendor agreement under the HOA record statute. If they refuse, file a complaint with the state. If they produce it, look for the payment terms. If Michelle is listed as a contact or if there is a referral fee clause, that is your proof. I took notes. Peter finished his coffee and stood up. He handed me a business card with his email. Let me know if you need a witness. I will testify at a hearing or in court. Michelle burned a lot of people. It is time someone pushed back. I went home and drafted a records request. I asked for the vendor agreement, the board authorization for Michelle's role, and all enforcement logs for the past year. I sent it by certified mail to the HOA registered agent and copied the management company. 3 days later, I got a response. The board denied the request. They said enforcement logs were confidential and the vendor agreement was proprietary. They said I could appeal the denial at the next board meeting. I forwarded the denial to Linda. She called me back and said the denial was improper. Maryland HOA law requires disclosure of vendor contracts and enforcement policies. She said if the board did not reverse the denial, I could file a complaint with the county or sue for access. The same day I got the denial, a new sign appeared overnight at the entrance to my street. The sign had no readable text, but it had a red circle with a diagonal line and an icon of a car. Below it was a smaller sign that said something about permits and decals. I took a photo and sent it to Linda. She said she had no record of the board approving any new signage. That evening, Michelle showed up at my door. She knocked hard. I opened the door but left the security chain on. She held up a citation slip. Your guest pass decal is not valid because it is slightly crooked. You are in violation of the new parking amendment. You have 24 hours to fix it, or you get towed again. I looked at the slip. The date on it was today. The rule it cited had an effective date of yesterday. I asked when the amendment was passed. Michelle said it was passed at an emergency board session 2 nights ago. I asked why residents were not notified. She said the notice was posted on the website, and that was sufficient. I took a photo of the citation and closed the door. I called Linda. She was furious. She said emergency sessions require 48 hours notice to all owners and the management company. If the board held a session without notice, any actions taken were void. I asked what I should do about the citation. Linda said ignore it. She said she was scheduling a meeting with the board president and the HOA attorney for the end of the week. She wanted me there. The next morning I woke up to a knock on my door. I opened it. A man in a brown uniform handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter from the HOA attorney. It said I had damaged common property during the tow incident and I was being charged $800 for repairs. If I did not pay within 10 days, I would be charged $50 per day in late fees. I read it twice. I did not damage anything. The tow was canceled. My car never left the driveway. I called Linda and read her the letter. She told me to take photos of the area where the tow happened. If there was no damage, the photos would prove it. I went outside and took photos of my driveway, the curb, the street, and the grass strip along the edge. Everything looked fine. No tire marks, no gouges, no damage. I sent the photos to Linda and Peter. Peter replied within an hour. He said the damage claim was a standard intimidation tactic. Michelle used it on him when he questioned a fine. The HOA billed him for a cracked sprinkler head that was already broken. He refused to pay, and they added late fees for 6 months. Eventually, he paid just to stop the harassment. I was not paying. I replied to the attorney's letter with a demand for evidence of damage. I included the photos and a copy of the management company's email stating the tow was unauthorized. I sent it certified mail. 2 days later, the board president called me. His name was Greg Morton. He sounded tired. He said the board wanted to resolve this without litigation. He said Michelle had been overzealous and the board was reviewing her actions. He offered to drop the damage claim and waive the citation if I dropped my records request and stopped talking to other residents. I told him I was not dropping anything. I said Michelle forged a board authorization and tried to steal my car. I said the vendor agreement was illegal and I wanted it reviewed. Greg was quiet for a long time. Then he said the board would discuss it at the next meeting and he would get back to me. I did not hear from him again until the day of the meeting. He sent an email saying the meeting was moved to a new location and the time was pushed back by 2 hours. I forwarded the email to Linda. She said the late change was a violation of notice rules and I should show up at the original time and location anyway. I did. The original meeting was supposed to be at the clubhouse at 7 p.m. I got there at 6:45. The door was locked and the lights were off. A handwritten note taped to the door said the meeting had been moved to a conference room at a hotel across town. No address, no room number. I called Linda. She said she was already at the hotel. She gave me the address and room number. I drove over. By the time I got there, it was 7:30. The meeting had started. I walked into the conference room. There were about 15 people sitting in folding chairs. Greg was at the front with Michelle beside him. The HOA attorney was there, a thin man in a gray suit with a leather folder. Linda was sitting in the back row. She waved me over. Greg saw me and paused. He said, "We were just discussing the enforcement budget for next quarter. We will get to your issue in a moment." I sat down next to Linda. She whispered, "They have been stalling for 20 minutes. They do not want you to speak." Greg moved through 3 more agenda items: budget amendments, landscaping bids, pool maintenance. Every time someone asked a question, he gave a long answer. It was 8:15 by the time he said, "Now we will hear from residents with concerns." I stood up. I pulled out a folder and walked to the front. Greg looked at Michelle. She looked at the attorney. I set the folder on the table. "I have a complaint about Michelle Hayes and the enforcement process. I was illegally booted and nearly towed 3 weeks ago. The authorization was forged. The management company confirmed Michelle does not have authority to order tows. Since then, I have been hit with fraudulent damage claims and citations under rules that were never properly passed. I am here to request a full audit of all enforcement actions Michelle has taken and a suspension of her role pending that audit." Greg cleared his throat. "We are aware of the incident. We are reviewing it internally. We do not need to air all of this in a public meeting." I opened the folder. Inside was a tabbed binder. I had printed every email, every photo, every text, every voicemail. I had tabs for the forged authorization, the doorbell footage, the management company emails, Peter's spreadsheet, the fraudulent damage claim, and the illegal meeting notice. I set the binder on the table. "This is not an internal issue. This is fraud. Michelle forged a board signature, ordered an illegal tow, and tried to extort $800 for damage that does not exist. I have a third-party inspection report proving my property is compliant, and I have copies for everyone here, including the HOA attorney." I pulled out a stack of stapled packets and handed them to the front row. "Pass these back. 1 for each board member, 1 for the attorney, 1 for the management company." Michelle stood up. Her face was red. "You cannot just hand out documents. This is not how meetings work." Linda stood up. "Actually, residents have the right to present evidence at a board meeting. It is in your own bylaws." Michelle pointed at Linda. "You do not even live here. You are not a resident. You are a hired contractor. You do not get to speak." Linda smiled. "I represent the management company, which has a fiduciary duty to this HOA. I absolutely get to speak." Greg held up his hand. "Everyone sit down. We will take a 5-minute recess and review these documents." I sat back down. Michelle grabbed her phone and walked out of the room. The attorney opened the packet and started reading. His face did not change, but he flipped through the pages fast. 5 minutes turned into 15. Michelle did not come back. Greg and the attorney went into the hallway and talked in low voices. Finally, Greg came back in and sat down. He looked at me. "We are going to table this discussion and schedule a special session with legal counsel present. We need time to review everything." I shook my head. "No. I have been waiting 3 weeks. I brought proof. You have it in front of you." The management company confirmed Michelle acted without authority. "The board needs to suspend her role tonight, or I file a complaint with the county tomorrow." The attorney leaned over and whispered to Greg. Greg nodded. Then he said, "The board will vote to suspend Michelle's enforcement duties pending an internal investigation. All active citations she issued in the past 60 days will be frozen until the investigation is complete." I asked about refunds for improper fines. Greg said the board would address that after the investigation. I asked when the investigation would be done. Greg said 30 days. Linda stood up. The management company recommends the board retain an independent auditor to review all vendor contracts and enforcement records. If Michelle was operating outside her authority, the HOA may have liability. The attorney nodded. I agree. We should bring in a third party. Greg looked exhausted. Fine. We will arrange that. Meeting adjourned. People started filing out. Michelle still had not come back. I walked over to Linda. She was putting papers into her bag. She said, "You did good. That binder was perfect. They have no choice now." I asked what would happen to Michelle. Linda said the board would probably terminate her role, and the management company would file a report with the state if they found evidence of kickbacks or fraud. She said I should expect retaliation and keep documenting everything. I left the hotel and drove home. When I pulled into my driveway, there was a folding sign stand in the middle of the street in front of my house. The sign had a red circle and a diagonal line with a car icon. Below it was a notice about tow-away zones and something about permits. I got out of my car and checked the sign. It was not anchored, it was just sitting there on a plastic base. I pulled out my phone and recorded a video. Then I picked up the sign and carried it to the curb. I set it down and kept recording. A minute later, Michelle's SUV pulled around the corner. She saw me, stopped in the middle of the street, and rolled down her window. "What are you doing?" "That is HOA property. You cannot move it." I kept recording. This sign was not here this morning. No one authorized it. You planted it so you could cite me again. Michelle got out of her SUV and walked toward me. "Put it back." I shook my head. "I am keeping this video. You are on camera placing unauthorized signage. If you try to cite me for this, I will add it to the complaint." Michelle stopped about 10 feet away. Her hands were shaking. "You think you won tonight? You think the board is going to fire me? I have been doing this for 3 years. I know where every body is buried. If they try to get rid of me, I will take them all down." I lowered my phone. "Then maybe you should have played by the rules." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she got back in her SUV and drove off. I carried the sign into my garage and locked it. I uploaded the video to the cloud and sent it to Linda and Peter. The next day, Linda called. She said the board held an emergency executive session and voted to terminate Michelle's role immediately. The management company was taking over all enforcement duties. The board also voted to freeze all outstanding fines and hire an independent auditor to review every citation Michelle issued in the past year. I asked if Michelle was going to fight it. Linda said Michelle sent a resignation letter that morning. In the letter, she accused the board of targeting her unfairly and threatened to sue for wrongful termination. Linda said the HOA attorney advised the board to accept the resignation and move on. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the auditor. They had reviewed my case and found that Michelle had issued the tow order without board approval and had falsified the notice documentation. The auditor recommended the HOA retract the violation in writing, refund any fees I paid, and issue a formal apology. The board voted to accept the recommendation. I also got a call from a county compliance investigator. She said the county received multiple complaints about the HOA's towing practices and vendor relationships. She said they were opening an investigation and I might be asked to give a statement. I said I was happy to help. Peter sent me an email with a link to a local news article. The headline was about predatory HOA enforcement in Frederick County. The article mentioned Stonegate Reserve by name and included quotes from 3 residents who said they were targeted by improper fines. Michelle was not named, but the article said the HOA had terminated its enforcement coordinator and was conducting an internal audit. A week after that, Linda called with the final update. The county investigator had completed her review. She found that the HOA's vendor agreement with the tow company violated county regulations because it included a referral fee paid to the enforcement coordinator. The county issued a compliance order requiring the HOA to terminate the vendor agreement, adopt new enforcement policies, and submit to quarterly audits for 2 years. If the HOA did not comply, it would face fines. The board held a special meeting to vote on the county's order. They accepted it unanimously. They also voted to refund over $18,000 in fines that the auditor found were improperly assessed. I got a check in the mail 2 weeks later. It was for the boot removal fee and the damage claim Michelle tried to charge me. The check came with a letter signed by Greg. The letter said the board regretted the enforcement issues and was committed to fair and transparent policies going forward. I deposited the check and filed the letter. Peter sent me a congratulations text. He said 2 other residents had filed complaints with the county after hearing about my case, and the board was now facing pressure to replace half its members at the next election. Linda told me the management company was reviewing enforcement policies at all its properties in Maryland. She said my case had triggered a company-wide audit, and they had found similar problems at 3 other communities. She said I had probably saved a lot of people, a lot of money. I did not feel like a hero. I felt tired. I had spent a month fighting over a parking spot and a fake fine. I had documented everything, attended meetings, hired no one, and spent maybe $200 on certified mail and copies. In the end, the system worked, but only because I pushed it. Michelle never apologized. I heard from a neighbor that she moved out of state. I do not know if she faced any legal consequences. I do not know if she learned anything. I just know she is gone and the neighborhood is quieter. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more real HOA drama and satisfying payback stories. A few months later, I was walking to my car when I saw a new resident moving in across the street. A young couple with a moving truck. The guy waved. I waved back. Then I saw Michelle's replacement, a calm older woman named Angela, walking up to them with a welcome packet. She smiled, handed them the packet, and said if they had any questions about the rules, just call the office and someone would explain everything clearly. I watched her walk away. No clipboard. No camera. No threats. Just a welcome. The system was not perfect. The HOA still had rules. Some of them were still annoying. But the difference was night and day. Angela did not hunt for violations. She did not plant signs or forge authorizations. She answered emails and followed the process. I kept my documentation folder in my filing cabinet, just in case, but I never needed it again. I renewed my lease for another year. The neighborhood felt different. People parked without fear. Guest passes stayed valid as long as they were visible. The tow truck never came back. One evening, I was sitting on my porch when Peter stopped by. He had a folder under his arm. He said he was collecting signatures for a petition to change the board election rules. He wanted to require candidate forums and limit terms. He asked if I would sign. I signed. He thanked me and said he was running for the board himself. He said he wanted to make sure what happened with Michelle never happened again. He said the neighborhood needed people who would push back when the rules stopped making sense. I told him I would vote for him. A month later, Peter won a seat on the board. He sent me a text after the vote count. It said, "Thank you. We got this." I believed him. The HOA sent out a new enforcement policy a week later. It required written notice with photographic evidence for every violation. It required a 5-day appeal window with a hearing option. It banned referral fees in vendor contracts. It required quarterly reports on all fines collected and how the money was spent. I read the policy twice. It was not perfect, but it was fair. It was clear. It gave residents a chance to fight back without spending a fortune. I printed a copy and added it to my documentation folder. Then I closed the folder and put it away. The folder is still there. I check it sometimes, just to remind myself that the fight was real and I won. Not with lawyers or lawsuits, but with patience and a paper trail and one stubborn refusal to let someone lie without consequences. Karen demanded proof and then panicked when I handed out copies. A complaint to the management company triggered discipline. Karen was forced to retract her claim in writing. The HOA retracted the parking violation in writing. The system worked because I made it work. One document at a time. I hope this story kept you entertained.